The folder on the passenger seat had been sitting there since 6 in the morning. Nolan Pryce hadn't opened it again. He'd read everything twice the night before. The acquisition documents, the operational assessment, the staffing reports, and he didn't need to read them a third time. He knew what was in there. What he didn't know yet was what he was walking into. He pulled the truck into the parking garage on Clement Street and sat for a moment with the engine off. The Hargrove Grand had been his father's dream before it became his inheritance, and then his burden, and then, after 12 years of work he'd done mostly in silence, mostly without credit, his investment. The sale had closed 48 hours ago. Nobody at the hotel knew him by face. That was intentional. Nolan Pryce was 51 years old. He drove a truck that needed new wiper blades. He wore the same canvas jacket he'd worn for 6 years because it had deep pockets, and he liked deep pockets. His boots were scuffed. His wedding ring was plain gold, nothing decorative. He looked, to anyone who didn't know better, like a man who had come to make a delivery or apply for a job in the kitchen. He knew exactly how he looked. He had thought about it for a long time. He took the folder off the seat and walked toward the entrance. The lobby of the Hargrove Grand was the kind of place that had been designed to make certain people feel welcome, and other people feel like they had made a wrong turn. The ceilings were high. The floors were marble, real marble, not composite, one of the few things the previous ownership had gotten right. There were fresh orchids on the concierge desk. Soft piano music came from somewhere that Nolan couldn't immediately identify. He stood near the entrance for a moment, taking it in. The morning staff was moving through their routines. A bellman rolled a cart toward the elevator. 2 women at the front desk typed without looking up. Then a man in a dark blazer appeared from a doorway near the far end of the desk. His name badge said Front Desk Manager, Sterling Voss. He was somewhere in his late 30s, with the precise posture of someone who had decided that confidence and rigidity were the same thing. He scanned the lobby the way airport security scans a crowd, looking for things that didn't belong. His eyes landed on Nolan Pryce and stayed there. Nolan walked toward the front desk. He wasn't in a hurry. He set the folder down on the counter. "Morning," he said. Sterling Voss looked at the folder, then at Nolan's jacket, then at the folder again. Can I help you with something?" The words were technically polite. The tone was not. "I'm here to take a look around," Nolan said. "I'd like to start with the lobby and work my way through the back operations." Sterling Voss tilted his head very slightly. "I'm sorry?" "The property," Nolan said. "I want to walk it." There was a pause. Sterling Voss had the practiced ability of someone who had spent years deciding in the first 3 seconds whether a person deserved full service or abbreviated tolerance, and he had already made his decision about the man standing in front of him. "Sir, this is the Hargrove Grand. We don't offer property tours. If you're interested in booking a room, our reservations team—" "I'm not booking a room." Another pause. Shorter this time. "Then I'm not sure what you're looking for," Sterling Voss said. "But I can tell you that we have a very busy morning ahead of us, and if you're not a registered guest, I'm going to have to ask you to." "To what?" Nolan asked. Sterling Voss straightened. "To step aside, sir. The lobby is for hotel guests and their visitors." Nolan looked at him for a moment, not with anger, with something closer to patience, the specific patience of a man who had expected this and had decided a long time ago that when it came, he would let it breathe before he addressed it. "I understand," Nolan said. He picked up his folder and walked to one of the lobby chairs near the window and sat down. Sterling Voss stared after him. He had been sitting for perhaps 4 minutes when Sterling Voss appeared in front of him again. He had brought someone this time, a younger man in a security polo, whose name tag said Caven. "Sir." Sterling Voss' voice had dropped into the register he used when he wanted to project authority without technically making a scene. "I explained that this area is reserved for hotel guests. If you've come in off the street, I'm going to need you to. What's your vacancy rate this week?" Sterling Voss stopped. "Excuse me?" "Vacancy rate," Nolan said. "For the week." "What is it? That's not." Sterling Voss caught himself. "That's not information I'm going to share with. What about the restaurant? How's the morning service running? I saw the dining room on my way in. Looked like 4 tables occupied out of maybe 40. Sterling Voss's jaw tightened. "Sir, I don't know what you think you're doing, but I'm going to need you to leave the property now, or I'm going to have Kevin escort you out." Kevin, to his credit, did not look enthusiastic about this assignment. Nolan Pryce opened the folder on his knee and took out a single document. He held it out towards Sterling Voss. Sterling Voss did not take it. "What is that?" he said. "It's the acquisition agreement," Nolan said. "Finalized the day before yesterday. Take a look at the signature on page 3. Something shifted in the air between them. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic. It was the specific silence that falls when a man realizes he has walked into a room and the room is not what he thought it was. Sterling Voss took the document. His eyes moved down the page, then to page 3. Then he stopped moving entirely. The name on the signature line was Nolan Pryce. Nolan had not always known he would end up here. He had not grown up with hotels. He had grown up in Greensboro, North Carolina, in a house with a leaking roof his father repaired every spring with the same roll of tar paper. His mother had worked the front desk at a Holiday Inn for 22 years, not as a manager, not in any capacity that would have suggested to anyone watching that her son would one day own something. But Nolan had watched anyway. He had watched the way guests treated her. The ones who didn't look at her when they spoke, who handed her their credit cards the way you hand someone a tissue. He had watched her absorb it. He had watched her come home and make dinner and not talk about it. He had decided somewhere around the age of 14 that he would spend his life building something that couldn't be taken away or overlooked. He had spent 27 years doing exactly that. Commercial real estate, then hospitality consulting, then a regional chain in the southeast that he had built from 2 properties to 11 before he sold it and started again. The Hargrove Grand was not his biggest acquisition. It was his most intentional one. He had chosen it because it was struggling. Because the bones were good and the management was not. Because it was the kind of place that should have been thriving. Right location, right history. Right name, and instead it was bleeding. He had read the operational reports with the particular attention of someone who already understood exactly what was wrong. The wrong things were fixable. He had fixed wrong things before. What he had not yet had to fix was a front desk manager who decided in 10 seconds that the owner of the building was not welcome in the building. Sterling Voss read the document twice, maybe 3 times. The orchids on the concierge desk hadn't moved. The piano music from the dining room was still playing. Kevin, the security guard, had quietly taken 2 steps backward and was now stationed near the pillar in a way that made him part of the decor. Sterling Voss started. He stopped, started again. "Mr. Pryce, Nolan," he said. I wasn't informed that." Sterling Voss was doing the calculation now, and the numbers were not coming out in his favor. He was looking at the jacket, he was looking at the boots, he was looking at the folder that had been sitting on the counter while he decided its owner was not worth his time. "No one was informed," Nolan said. That was intentional. He stood up. He was the same height as Sterling Voss, just under 6 feet. But there was something about the way he moved, unhurried and direct, that made the space between them feel like it belonged to him. "I want to walk the property," he said. "I'd like to start with the lobby and work my way through the back operations. Is that going to be a problem?" Sterling Voss opened his mouth. "Don't answer that," Nolan said. There was a woman at the concierge desk who had watched the whole thing without moving. Her name was Patricia Holden, and she had worked at the Hargrove Grand for 11 years. Longer than Sterling Voss had been with the company, longer than 2 previous general managers, longer than the last 3 ownership groups. She had a specific skill that she had developed over those 11 years, which was the ability to understand a situation quickly and respond to it with the minimum amount of drama. She had understood this situation about 45 seconds in. When Nolan approached the concierge desk, she straightened. "Mr. Pryce," she said. "I'm Patricia. Can I get you some coffee? We have the Sumatra blend this morning. It's good." Nolan looked at her. Something in him relaxed slightly. Not enough for anyone to see, but enough to be real. "That sounds good," he said. "Thank you, Patricia." She nodded and picked up the phone. She did not look at Sterling Voss. This, Nolan noted, was its own kind of information. The kitchen was running at about 60% of where it should have been. The line prep was acceptable. The storage was not. There were 3 separate refrigeration units operating when consolidation would have cut the energy cost significantly. And the inventory system was so outdated it was still being tracked partially on paper. Nolan said nothing about this to the kitchen staff. He walked through quietly, nodded at the sous chef, who was the only person willing to make eye contact, and made notes in the margin of his operational assessment. The housekeeping floor was better. The housekeeping supervisor, a woman named Greta, had a system that was working well. Room turnover was efficient. Her team moved like people who had been organized by someone who cared about organization. Nolan spent more time on that floor than he had planned to. Sterling Voss trailed him through all of it. He had recovered some of his composure by the time they reached the second floor, and by the housekeeping level, he had reconstructed something approaching his professional affect. He used phrases like, "as you can see," and "we've been working to address," and "I think you'll find that." He did not acknowledge what had happened in the lobby. Nolan let him talk. There was a time for that conversation, and it was not while they were standing in a linen storage room. They came back to the lobby around 10:30. The dining room had filled slightly. 8 tables now, which was still a fraction of capacity, but better than 4. The piano was gone. Apparently, it was only for the morning rush. Patricia was helping a guest at the concierge desk with what appeared to be directions. Nolan set his folder on the counter near the front desk and turned to face Sterling Voss. The 2 women at the desk were pretending to type. Kevin was still near his pillar. "I want to talk about this morning," Nolan said. Sterling Voss drew a breath. "Mr. Pryce, I understand that there was a miscommunication." "There wasn't a miscommunication. The lobby was very quiet. You made a decision about who I was before I said 10 words, Nolan said. You made that decision based on what I was wearing and where you assumed I came from, and then you worked backward from that decision to justify asking me to leave." Sterling Voss had the look of a man trying to decide between 3 different responses and not being able to commit to any of them. "I've seen that look before," Nolan said. "Not here specifically. In other lobbies. In restaurants. In meeting rooms where people already decided before I sat down that I was someone they didn't need to take seriously." He paused. "I understand the instinct. What I'm telling you is that I have no patience for it in a property I own." "I understand," Sterling Voss said. His voice was careful. "Controlled. I'm not sure you do," Nolan said. "But I'm going to give you the opportunity to." He picked up his folder. "I'm going to need HR files for the management team by Friday. I'm going to need the last 6 months of operational reports, and I'm going to need a full staff meeting called for Monday morning. 7 o'clock, everyone." He paused at the entrance to the dining room. "And Sterling?" Sterling Voss looked up. "The orchids on the concierge desk are dead on the left side. Replace them today." The staff meeting on Monday was held in the hotel's banquet room, which was the only space large enough for the full team. Nolan arrived at 6:50 and stood at the back while the room filled. He had dressed the same way he had on Thursday: canvas jacket, dark jeans, the scuffed boots. This was also intentional. He watched them come in. The kitchen crew in their checked pants and clogs. The housekeeping team in their uniforms, the front desk staff, the maintenance team, the dining room servers, the night auditors who had come in on their off hours because they'd been told attendance was required. Patricia Holden came in and found a seat near the front. She had brought her coffee. Sterling Voss stood near the side wall with 2 other managers, holding a legal pad. He had the expression of a man who had spent the weekend preparing for something he still didn't entirely understand. At exactly 7 o'clock, Nolan walked to the front of the room. It took a moment for the room to realize who he was. Then it took another moment for the room to realize that the man in the canvas jacket who had just walked to the podium was apparently the person they were all here to see. He didn't have notes. "My name is Nolan Pryce," he said. "I purchased the Hargrove Grand last week. I'm going to be your new owner, and for the next several months, your interim managing director, which means I'm going to be around more than most owners are. I want you to get used to that." The room was paying attention. This he could feel. "I want to tell you something before we get into the operational details," he said, "because I think it'll save us time later." He let that sit for a moment. "I grew up watching my mother work a front desk for 22 years. She was good at it. She was better at it than most of the people above her, and she was treated for most of those 22 years like someone who was there to be used and ignored. I watched that." He paused. "And then I built a career doing the opposite. Every property I've ever owned, I've built it on one principle. The people who show up every day and do the work are the ones who make the place. Not the ownership group, not the management structure, the people in this room." The kitchen crew in the back row had stopped fidgeting. "I'm going to invest in this property. I'm going to fix what's broken. I'm going to update what's outdated. And I'm going to expect I am going to require that every person on this staff at every level treats every other person they encounter with basic respect. Guests, colleagues, and people who walk in off the street and look like they don't belong. He glanced at Sterling Voss once. Just once. Because in my experience, Nolan said, the people who look like they don't belong are sometimes the people who own the building. Patricia Holden told him afterward, in the corridor outside the banquet room, that the housekeeping supervisor Greta had started clapping first. That it had taken about 3 seconds before the whole room had followed. Patricia said this without any particular drama. She said it the same way she'd offered him the Sumatra coffee, like it was a piece of information he might find useful. How long have you worked here? He asked. 11 years, she said. Did you like working here? She considered this with the seriousness it deserved. I like the building, she said. I like the people I work with directly. There have been parts of the management structure that I have had less enthusiasm for. He nodded. I'm going to want to talk to you more about the property, about what's working and what's not. She looked at him steadily. I'll tell you the truth, she said. Not what you want to hear. That's exactly what I need, he said. Sterling Voss was still at the Hargrove Grand 6 months later. This surprised some people who heard the story. It had surprised Nolan, too, when he'd first thought about it in the days after that Thursday morning. He'd turned it over. The way you turn a decision over when you know there's no clean answer. He thought about his mother. He thought about the lobbies he had stood in. He thought about the 27 years of building something from a position where people had already decided you were nothing. And then he had thought about what he actually needed, which was a front desk manager who knew the operational systems of this property cold, and who, when given an unambiguous reason to change, had the capacity to understand it. The conversation had happened privately 2 days after the walkthrough. No legal pad, no HR presence, just the two of them in the back office. You have a choice, Nolan had said. You can keep this job. What you can't keep is the version of this job where you decide in the first 10 seconds which people deserve your attention. He had not raised his voice. If you can make that change, I'll know, because the staff will tell me, and the guests will tell me, and Patricia will tell me, and she doesn't lie. Sterling Voss had been quiet for a long moment. I understand, he said. Do you? Nolan said. Because I want to be clear about what happened. You didn't make a mistake about a guest. You made a mistake about me, which means you're making the same mistake every day about people who aren't in a position to correct you. That's what I need you to understand. Something in Sterling Voss's office changed. Not all at once, but something. He was still working on it 6 months later. Nolan watched it, the incremental, unsteady, often imperfect work of a man trying to see something he had never been required to see before. He didn't always get it right. Nolan heard about the days he didn't from Patricia, but he was working on it. Nolan believed in the work of it. He believed in it the way his mother had believed in showing up to a job for 22 years, even when the job didn't fully show up for her, with patience and stubbornness, and the conviction that the effort was not wasted just because it was slow. The Hargrove Grand reopened its rooftop terrace 4 months into Nolan's ownership. It had been closed for 2 years under the previous management. Insurance issue, paperwork nobody had prioritized, another item on the long list of things that had been left to calcify. Nolan had cut through the paperwork in 3 weeks. The reopening was not a big event. There were no press invitations. There was good food and the Sumatra coffee and a view of the city that, once people got up there, tended to stop them in their tracks. Patricia Holden was there. So was Greta from housekeeping, and the sous chef whose name was Marcus. Not the Marcus from anyone else's story. This one was 26 and from Memphis and had opinions about cornbread that Nolan respected deeply. Kevin the security guard was there, having been quietly shifted from lobby surveillance to a role in guest services that fit him considerably better. Several of the front desk staff were there. Sterling Voss was there. He stood near the railing and looked at the city. Nolan stood near the door for a while, watching the room. He had the folder under his arm. A different folder now, the one with the renovation proposals for the East Wing. He hadn't opened it yet. There would be time. Patricia appeared at his elbow with 2 cups of coffee. You should be proud of this place, she said. I'm getting there, Nolan said. He took the coffee. The city was gold in the evening light, the way cities sometimes are when the angle is right and the air is clear and you're standing somewhere high enough to see it whole. He had spent a long time getting here. He had spent a long time being the man in the canvas jacket that no one looked at twice. He didn't regret any of it. The not looking had been their loss, and he had always known it, and that knowledge, quiet, steady, never needing to announce itself, had been the thing that kept him moving forward when the lobbies closed their faces to him. He thought about his mother. He thought about the 22 years. He thought she would like this view. And the coffee was good, and the terrace was open, and the Hargrove Grand was his.